So I'm starting my chicken sausage gumbo. I'm using chicken thighs. I don't like breast. Breast is kind of dry. So I'm browning my chicken thigh pieces, and this is going to be the basis for my roux once I remove the meat. I've got my andouille sausage over here. I'm also going to put a bit of chorizo in there to give it a little bit of spice, but not too much. And I'll just sort of record and edit as I go along. I've got a nice fond buildup on that pan, and that's what I'm looking for. And that's going to give a lot of flavor to my roux. Some people use vegetable oil for the roux. I like to use clarified butter. Clarified butter, of course, when you remove the milk solids, it won't burn, and it can withstand a higher heat, as you see here, without burning. There, and now I've got my andouille sausage and my chorizo. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, a little more andouille than chorizo. Chorizo can be a bit spicy, so I don't want to make this too spicy. Just a little bit of kick. Now I'm going to render that a little bit. And I've removed the skins, the casings from the sausage. And the oil from the sausage is going to create the oil for the roux, because for any type of roux you need a fat, right? Either it's butter or oil. And I'm going to add some more clarified butter. Once I remove this and add it to my other meat there, my chicken, I'll start building the roux with the flour and the fat. I think the key component to any good gumbo is the roux. Many people stop at an early stage, and I'll show you. Typically for a roux, for any kind of gravy, you don't really have to cook the roux very long, but for a gumbo, the darker you let it go, once you get to that peanut butter color stage, you want to even go a little longer than that. I kind of go to the peanut butter a little beyond that kind of color. And anyone who's built a gumbo before knows what I'm talking about when it comes to a roux. Traditionally, if you go into the deep south or Louisiana, traditional gumbos, those roux are almost the color of chocolate. But I'm in Canada. I'm not striving for that. That takes a long time. You got to stand over the stove for an hour or more till you get to that color, and you can't let it burn. Stirring a roux. We'll get there. Okay, so now you can see that fond in my pan. That's so much flavor in there from the chicken, the andouille sausage, and the chorizo. And I got all my meat sitting there, and that'll be added back into my gumbo at a later stage. Now I'm going to add more butter, clarify it, and add my flour and start building my roux. So now I've got my flour in there, and you usually want equal parts flour to fat for a roux, for a gumbo roux. For a gravy, I would go thicker, of course. And I'm pulling up all that fond off the bottom of the pan. And I'm going to let that cook for a while until I get to the color I like. I'm not going to let it go dark, but then I add what's called the Trinity, which is essentially, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. In French cuisine, you have a mirepoix, which is celery, onion, carrot. And in Cajun cooking, which is inspired by French cuisine, the Trinity consists of celery, onion, and bell pepper. I usually use green bell pepper. And that'll be going into the roux. And you begin to cook the Trinity in this roux until it's a big, thick, globular kind of thing. And then I add my homemade chicken stock and simmer that for a while until my vegetables are tender. And then I add the meat mixture, the sausages and chicken, and let that simmer for a while. And that's the gumbo. I could add okra. I went to the store, a couple of grocery stores yesterday locally, and they didn't have it. One person didn't even know what okra was. But that's Canada, right? Safeway they knew, but they didn't have any in stock. The girl figured they might, but it's not something they sell a lot of. So, and okra is not really a key component to gumbo. You don't really need it, and I'm not making a huge quantity, so that's why I don't have a lot of roux in the base here. But a gumbo should not be, it should be the consistency somewhere between a soup and a stew. When I cook my beef, my Irish stew, it's thicker. You want the gumbo, because typically you add rice. So you put the gumbo in the bowl first, and then you know, a couple spoonfuls of rice. Rice always after the gumbo. Never put the rice in first. And yeah, we're gonna let that go. Wow, right now the smell coming off this roux is amazing, y'all. I thought I'd throw a y'all in there. Anyway, it's darkening up nicely. I'm gonna start, I'm to the point where I can leave this for a minute or so without stirring, but there will come a point where I'll have to stir continuously and really hover over it. So right now, while I can let it sit for a minute or two, well, I'm gonna dice my vegetables and keep an eye on this. Bang, bang, bang. All right, that roux is looking fantastic. I got my Trinity, my onion, celery, and bell pepper, pretty much equal parts of each. That's all ready to go into my roux. And I'm just gonna cook this a little longer, maybe another 10 minutes. It smells amazing. And all those flavors from the meat, the fond from the meat, that little bit of fond that's still there is gonna loosen up once I add my Trinity. So I've got my Trinity there and my meat. I got my chicken stock, my homemade chicken stock in the fridge. I simmered a bunch of bones last night. And if you've seen previous videos of mine, I do that. I think every 6 weeks I do a big batch of consommé double, a bone broth beef chicken. Yeah, you can see this roux coming along. And yes, it was a little bit dark because of the fond from the meat, but you can tell the difference now. We're getting beyond the peanut butter color. Just that nutty smell, it's amazing. And that's kind of where most people stop. Some people stop even before this stage. I'm gonna let it get a little darker. And then I'll add my Trinity. But you gotta watch it. I've been stirring it pretty consistently here. You don't wanna walk away at this stage and at this heat. And it takes a little bit of practice to find out the right heat, because this is crucial. If you do burn it, you're starting from scratch. You're screwed. You gotta be careful. There, so now I've added my Trinity to my roux. I'm gonna put a lid on it for a few minutes. I added a little bit of salt, sweat those vegetables down and soften them up a little bit. You don't wanna cook them all the way. And the meat is about 80% cooked through the chicken. So the remainder will cook when I add that and my stock. So yeah, I'm gonna lid this for maybe 10 minutes. Smells amazing. So yeah, you can see that thick goopy roux mixed in with the veggies, and I've sweated them down pretty good. A lot of people, you know, a lot of gumbo purists, and maybe people in Louisiana would never consider adding red wine, but I do. I think it adds a little bit of depth to the flavor. Not that there's not enough. There's a lot of flavor there already, believe me, but just a splash of red wine into that as it's sweating, as it's cooking, and as the vegetables are sort of softening up, that's a good stage to add it. And the alcohol, of course, will dissipate. But that flavor combined with everything else in here. And I should add, I did use garlic. I forgot to put that in my video. I got 3 cloves of garlic in there. I used a garlic press, and so that's all in there too. So can't forget garlic. I was going to add a 4th clove, but they were pretty big, so I think 3 is enough for what I've got. And the ratio is going to be good. That's going to sweat down a little bit. It looks like a lot more vegetable, but a lot of that is the roux. And then I've got my meat there. I think it's going to be perfect once I add my chicken stock and let that simmer for a while. I wonder if you can hear that. You can see it. I wish we had smell-o-vision, because it smells freaking amazing. All right, so now this is to the point where I can add my stock. I got my big, huge pot of chicken stock here. I just got to skim off a little bit of fat. It's chilled, but I'll remove that fat and it's going to be golden goodness underneath there. So liquid gold. Yeah, this smells so amazing. Wow. I'll get in there again. I guess with me editing, it seems like 20 minutes ago, but for you, it'd probably be 30 seconds ago the last time I did that. So now I've added my chicken stock, and I'm going to let that simmer for a while on low, just to cook the vegetables a little more. And just from experience and you know, timing things, I don't like mushy vegetables, and I don't like my meat chewy. So, or my chicken chewy. I mean, the sausage is what it is, but the chicken, you want that tender. So I kind of know the stage to put that in. This is thickening. It looks like soup right now, but it will thicken as it simmers. I got a little bit of extra stock there that I removed from the big pot here in the event that I need some, but I don't think I will. I think this is looking perfect. And anyone who knows me, like working in the kitchen and stuff like that, at home here, I never use recipes, ever. Never, ever. I go by feel, by eye, pinch of this, pinch of that. I just kind of know. Yeah, that's just how I cook. I just adapted that. And when I was a boy, I worked in kitchens, but I mean, I haven't worked in a restaurant since I was 17 or 18. Just home cooking. But I think a lot of my culinary skill, if I have any, I think I acquired a lot of that from my mom, but also working in restaurants when I was younger. I never made gumbo in a restaurant. These are just things I learned as I go through life, right? I don't make gumbo very often, but it is a beautiful dish. And I recommend everyone that has a little bit of inclination to the culinary kind of arts, or if they like cooking at home, to try making this. And there's probably countless recipes online. I've never looked them up, but this is how I do it. I have made a shrimp gumbo, a chicken shrimp gumbo with sausage, but I didn't have any shrimp. And I like that too, but I kind of just love the sausage chicken gumbo, chicken sausage with andouille sausage. Andouille is a Cajun type sausage. I think it's a lot like a farmer's sausage, but traditional andouille, they use inners, like intestines and stuff like that, whereas farmer's sausage doesn't. They look similar, but the andouille sausage we get here in Canada is very similar to a farmer's sausage. They're not using inners. They're using pork, you know, different cuts of pork. They're not using inners, so no worries for anybody with an aversion to tripe. That's not in the Canadian andouille sausage. I looked at the ingredients. And I bet you in Louisiana, a lot of the andouille sausage you buy in the grocery store does not contain inners. But traditionally, that's what it's made from, pork inners. Maybe beef too, I'm not sure. But like I mentioned before, my stock that went in here, that makes a huge difference. A lot of people will use bottled stock, or, you know, in the box you buy in the store. That's okay, but I think using a homemade chicken stock, if you have that at your disposal, it makes a huge difference. But look at that color. And that's from the roux. Granted, I put maybe a quarter cup of red wine, but it was already that color before I added the red wine. And that's from letting that roux cook to a chocolatey kind of brown. Some people let it go even darker. I swear, like I've seen some people let it go almost black, but obviously it would be burnt if it was black, but really, really dark. But this is where I like it. So I'm gonna keep simmering that. And I'll put the lid on it for a bit so I don't evaporate too much of my liquid content. All right, now I got my meat, my sausage and chicken in there, and we're just gonna let that simmer for a bit. And it still will thicken up a little bit, especially after it sits, and it's always better the next day, just like a stew. And always served with rice. But I've seen some people put the rice down first and the gumbo. No, you don't do that. You put the gumbo in the bowl, then the spoonful of rice on top. or a couple spoonfuls or whatever you desire. Now I'm going to let that simmer for about 20 minutes. Shut it off, and that should be perfect. Okay, the lighting here isn't so good. But it's not a huge portion. I'm not starving right now. That's kind of the consistency you want. Unfortunately, I don't have any chives or green onion. Sometimes I'll do that. Now I'm going to add my rice, just 1 scoop of rice. There, so I have my rice added. I'm going to try and break it up with a fork. And I usually cook my rice like sticky rice. That's kind of what's going on here. And that's that. Sometimes some green onion diced on top is a good finishing touch. Maybe parsley, but I would usually put green onion, but unfortunately I don't have any. And that's going to be my gumbo. And you can do whatever you like with that rice, break it up. That's the gumbo. And the chicken just falls apart. It's so tender, it's perfect, you know. So anyways, that's a Canadian guy doing a gumbo. I think I got the color good. I transferred it to a different pot here. But you look at how nice and dark that is. I mean, I know some people go a lot darker, but that's where it's at for me.